Hello, welcome everyone to this panel, Lessons from the Best Places to Work. My name is Chris, I run gamesindustry.biz, and I also run a big event project called The Best Places to Work. This is something dedicated to video games, and it's where we speak to employers, survey staff, and do in-depth checks to find out where the best places to work in video games are. Companies have to put themselves forward, and most of the judging is done on how the employees feel about where they work. We've been running this for 5 years now, and we've had shows in the US, UK, and earlier this week, in fact, we did a show in Canada. And you can rewatch that now if you like. It's part of MEGAMIGS, and it's also on the Gamesindustry.biz YouTube channel. Now, these awards aren't all about giving out prizes. In fact, the pitch of the event is that we want to make the games industry a better place to work. That's the dream. We do that by providing feedback to all the companies who take part, whether they win or not. But we also do what Gamesindustry.biz does best. We write articles, we produce podcasts, we film videos, all full of tips and guidance on becoming better games employers. And that is what this panel is all about. And we have 4 winners with us today, 3 from the Canada event, Square Enix, Eidos, Hyper Hippo, and Phoenix Lab, and 1 from our US event, Iron Galaxy. Actually, Phoenix Labs also won the US awards as well, so sort of 2 from the US. And they're here to share their views and ideas on being great games employers. So hello, everyone. That was a long intro, but welcome. Hello. Well, let's begin with introductions, because who are you? So can each one of you introduce yourself? And as you do that, sort of tell us what you think makes a great games company. And Jennifer, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Kilback. I'm Chief Business Officer at Hyper Hippo. A great games company starts with great people and making great products. And then from there, there's a few things to help that along that we need to do as leaders in the company, and that is listening is key, because we listen to our players, that's fundamental, and then we listen to each other as team members, and we find out, how are you doing, what's working, what needs to change, and what do we need to improve here. And then with that, we need to be adaptable to change as we listen to that feedback and what's happening in the industry and what the players want. And then the third thing I think is really important is to have fun. We're making entertainment, so let's have fun doing it. And those are the things that make a great game company. Great.
Whoever goes last is probably going to run out of things to say. Jesse, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm going to sound a little like a broken record because Jennifer called a lot of it, but like she said, it starts with the people. For me, anyways, I feel like there's a belief around that people are the ends, not the means. And then, ultimately I find that the best places that I've worked are ones that are very kind of community focused, working on things together and realizing bigger things together, where there's a good sense of feedback culture and transparency. And, realistically, where the business is in balance with all of the factors, not just a at all cost player focus, or not just a at all costs employee focus, or not just an at all cost monetary focus, like keeping everything in that careful balance, and really coming back to that kind of transparency and that working together kind of aspects, like making sure that you're also working with the team to recognize that, and not just being some boss that's laying down bad things on teams and without context.
And you're Phoenix Labs, right? You're the,
yes. Sorry. Hi, I'm Jesse. I run Phoenix Labs. I'm the CEO, longtime game developer. Sorry. Yep.
That's all right.
I'm nervous. It would seem too.
Everyone knows who you are. You don't need to do that bit. Chelsea, tell us about yourself and answer the question.
Yeah, I'm Chelsea Blasco. I am the co-CEO at Iron Galaxy Studios. Been with Iron Galaxy for 11 years, and in games about 16 years. And everything that Jennifer and Jesse said, I also agree with. It's definitely about people, making space for them to be heard. I think humility comes into play too. That desire, I know Jennifer said adaptability, but you have to remain humble to allow yourself to continue to evolve and to continuously improve and to continue to learn. I think continuous learning is very important. We have to realize we are ignorant of things and that that's okay. It just means we have more room to grow. And then collaboration. I think collaboration and respectful collaboration, especially in games, there's a lot of times where people's egos can be involved because people are very passionate about their ideas. And we have to have spaces where people can respectfully collaborate on those ideas.
Great answer. And last, but definitely not least, Marie.
Hi, I'm Marie-Chantal Ledoux. I'm obviously speaking French as my first language, so thank you for your patience. And so I'm the executive in charge of Talent and Culture Canada for Eidos Square Enix Studios. So namely, we are Eidos Montreal, Eidos Sherbrooke, and Square Enix Montreal for the mobile part. I joined the industry 2 years ago. And so what does it take to be a good games company? It's, of course, I'm really going to sound like the fourth broken record here. It's it's really people, of course, and it's in any industry, it's people, but mostly in games industry, because it's the people, the ideas, the creative ideas, innovation that makes great games. So, and everything you said, I totally agree. So I'm just not going to repeat.
Well, Marie, sort of one of the Square Enix was one of our big winners this week, and one of the things that came out very strongly amongst the employees was the 4-day working week thing that you sort of introduced. Where did that come from? Where did that decision come from?
I don't know what you're talking about. No, I'm just kidding. Of course, it made a big noise in Montreal, and I'm going to say in all industries, by the way. So nobody knew where I was working before, and now they all can pronounce Eidos properly. So just joking about it, but we really were in all the papers locally doing this. So I really need to say that this is not a decision we took from day to day. We grew into that. And so from the last 2 years, we've been crafting a culture of empowerment. And the pandemic helped also, because you don't see your employees on a day-to-day, and we really trusted them to work and conduct their professional activities, from their places, and they bear with us, and we continue to produce a game. Like you saw that we launched Guardians of the Galaxy lately. So the pandemic helped, and because people were very zoomed out at the end of the day. I mean, our productivity was like 120%, because you zoom from one to the other. You never take coffee, never ask questions, never have rest time in your mind. We started giving out to everybody half a day per week. And it's been applied differently in all of the studios. Some studios bunch those half a day to making it 1 day every 2 weeks. Other people responsible empower their employees to use it as they wished or as they thought it was best to do. And then we just took it a step forward by giving a 4-day week. And we think that by doing this, we're going to improve, of course, work-life balance, but retention, lower turnover, and not only we're going to be as efficient as working 5 days a week, but we want also, because our people are going to be rested and more creative, and we're going to bring the games to the next step. So that is the intention. And of course, we're doing the plans right now to transition. And we're just about to transition. We're really at the beginning of all that. We'll be following that with KPIs it's how do you say, test and learn approach. Of course, we're going to be agile in that. And so I don't have any certainty at this time, but I'm convinced that it's going to be working fine.
Wow. And well, that's. Are there any concerns that you've got at all about it? Are you confident they're it's gonna work?
Well, like I said, I don't have. Well, of course, I have concerns. I'm not gonna lie about it. Everybody have concern, but from everything that was said here, I mean, we're empowering people. We talk, we listen, we're doing it together, and really, that's what we've been doing for the last 3 weeks, is making the plans to make sure that this works. And we're not doing it like the leadership alone. every team is working because everybody wants that. Everybody wants this to happen. So we're all doing it together, and great ideas have come up, and we listen, take the best out of everybody's idea, and we're going to apply it for the whole organization.
Well, we're all watching, and we'll all.
I know.
We'll all be interested to see the results.
It will be a pleasure.
Well, we'll move on to sort of Jennifer, because Hyper Hippo were the winner of the Health and Wellbeing Award as part of our awards, and I know that mental health is sort of one of your charitable pillars. Why has that been such an important focus for you?
Yeah, I think it started because I think we've all been impacted by mental health in one way, either personally, a family member, a friend. So we know it's in our workplace. It's got to be, because it's prevalent. And we really want to look after the whole person that comes to work at Hippo. So when the pandemic started, it was just magnified as well. The mental health aspect of dealing with anxiety and isolation. And so we started to respond by doing some yoga sessions at lunchtime, and we did a meditation session, and we brought in somebody to do a cognitive performance workshop with us about brain health and healthy habits to help us to, really still be productive in our work when we're sitting in front of these screens every day and isolated. And through those activities and workshop, people started to open up more and share, yeah, this is how I'm feeling. My energy levels are low. I am struggling. And so that just really was the catalyst for us to really put more focus on mental health. And we were revising our social Hippo impact. And it just made sense to layer in that recognition of mental health as something that was really important. It mattered to the team. And by doing that, we could put in place more awareness of mental health, and we could also support programs in mental health. So it was really a layering of that to support what we knew was happening in our team.
Because I suspect mental health is actually important to most of the winners of the Best Place to Work Awards. I think everyone is particularly aware of it and it's been. I know, speaking from my experience, the pandemic certainly has affected my team health-wise. I'll throw this up to the rest of the panel. How has the pandemic affected your team, and what have you been doing to sort of try and support them during all this? Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of different responses throughout. Some people were flourishing for a while, then things became tough for them. We had some people who are struggling early on. We're still all at home. We had a voluntary program to come back to the office, and a lot of that was really triggered on allowing people to come back and make connections. Because they were isolated at home. A lot of young people who lived alone, they weren't really getting to see anyone. And so that was very difficult. So we tried to create a space where people could come back safely. Unfortunately, with Delta and the areas in which we operate, we sent people home again. We have a plan in January to slowly allow people to come back to the office. So that was one of the things we thought about. How can we balance physical and mental health? And to try to support both. We talked a lot about the benefits that we have available. As a leadership team, we all did our best to model vulnerability and talk about our own challenges. I'm usually a very private person, and I have shared more in the last 2 years than I ever have in my life, trying to hopefully allow other people to see that it's okay and that everyone has struggles. We've been definitely also offering people grace. We've seen a few times where people have really not been their best selves, frankly, but we know that they are struggling with their mental health. And so we want to give them grace in those difficult situations. We also have given people communal opportunities for connection and grief management. We brought in grief counselor a few times throughout the pandemic to come in and facilitate, and those have been really well attended. We have talked again about the benefits, encourage people to use them. We try to have a lot of flexibility with people's work schedules, and that has changed with their needs over the pandemic. We offer parent and caregiver support groups. We have sent care packages. We're sending turkeys and vegan turkeys, and a lot of things. We brought just fun activities to do. So things that just try to bring people together in a variety of different ways as well. We sponsored Inktober so that people can, even though they're zoomed out some of the time, some of it is asynchronous. They don't have to be on the Zoom, but also just smaller groups. Having a full studio happy hour was one thing, but creating smaller group activities for people has been great to just give them more opportunity to get to know each other that they've never met in person. So I think that's important for people's mental health too.
Well, that's a lot of tips.
Yeah, sorry.
That was great. It was brilliant. Hopefully people watching are writing them down. Jesse, you've unmuted yourself. Yeah.
I was just going to say, like, kind of carrying along there, like, I think, finding people where they are has been really important, right? Like recognizing that how people interact with the world right now is not binary, right? Like some people really want to be at home and some people really want to be in a more social environment, and everywhere in between. And the, like, call it level of fear and uncertainty that people feel is also, very, very much not, identical. And so, we really, similar to what a lot of what's been said here is like didn't take a one size fits all approach. We really tried to make sure that, like, similarly that we did meditation training and mindfulness stuff and made some clubs. We did, after hours kind of social groups, similarly very small groups. Some teams, we started doing it studio wide, but then some folks continued to keep it doing it, and some didn't, but like a stand down at the end of the day. One of the things that we found very early off was, just speaking very candidly, productivity took a pretty big tumble early, in the early days. And we started realizing that people just weren't turning off. It wasn't that they weren't working, which might have been the easy way to look at it, but it's that they just weren't turning off. They were just working constantly. And so we've really actually spent a lot of time trying to moderate the amount of time people work. So we've always had a flexible, call it open-ended PTO policy, like our time off policy, vacation policy, or what have you. But due to a pandemic, nobody's using it. And so we've actually been monitoring it. Historically, we didn't do a really good job of monitoring it. Since the pandemic, we actually started monitoring it and going to folks and being like, yo, you're way behind the curve. Like, unplug, please. Right? Like we think of it as this idea of the rested edge. Like we want folks to feel very rested and whatnot. We've tried stuff like making sure that, like, you're not on Zoom 8 hours a day. And we do a lot of dipsticking in to make sure that, like, folks are, blocking their meetings together, but then also making sure that, like, they have large empty blocks so that they can find flow and find personal fulfillment. There's the vast majority of folks do work from here now, and now that it's now that there are no restrictions, the vast majority of folks do. Whereas our San Francisco, LA, and Montreal offices are chomping at the bit, almost like problematically so. Like some of our Montreal studios are like going to each other's houses, and it's like, yo, dudes, like, you're not supposed to do that. It's a pandemic. Please stay at home and do not work. Like, do not work with each other at your houses. But but really trying to make sure that we're paying attention. And like that was the main thing of, like, Sean, who's the head of our HR crew, is, maybe one of the most empathetic humans in the entire world. And a lot of his job is literally just going afield and making sure that he understands how people are, and then, working with them to find the right balance. Because it's so easy to build weird narratives in this time as well around, oh, people are back in the office. That means that Jesse wants you back in the office. Like, no, time out. Nope, that's not how it is. And you know, just making sure that people feel heard and that they feel like they've got a solution that is in balance with the needs of the business, and that they understand both ends of the spectrum, and that they recognize that we're not trying to just do something that fits for everybody, but instead something that fits for them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I did my team was remote before the pandemic, but we did used to get together once a week, and then when we just haven't done that for a long time, and most of us didn't really want to get together, but we ended up doing so about a week ago because an opportunity arose, and we just sort of went, oh, why not? And I think a few of us were really nervous about it. I was relatively okay with it, but other people were really nervous. Different situation in the UK, but when we all met up, lots of people that thought they didn't want to meet up realized they felt a lot better having done so. And it's sometimes it's you get the feedback, I don't want to come into the office, or I do want to come into the office, but actually when it happens, their response to it might not be what they expected. So it's I guess that's a challenging thing to work out when it comes to sort of moving people back.
I actually had a developer who, you know, candidly, the individual felt very pressured, which was a mistake on our part to come back in. And on their first day, they came into my office. On their first day back in, came to my office crying, and I'm like, "Oh no, what have we done?" And it was tears of joy though, and like the person in question like literally collapses, and I'm like holding them up because like they had not felt human connection. You know, they've been at home in their apartment, super afraid and justifiably very afraid, and like having this moment of like, you know, they hadn't even gone to a grocery store because they were so nervous, and all of a sudden to like literally feel the embrace of another human being for the first time in nearly a year was so overwhelming for them that and you know, like it was such a good reminder to me about how personal this is, how different this is personally, right? And for everybody, and how we have to just respect that.
Marie, do you have anything to?
Yeah, in complementary to all that, of course, a big challenge is to stay connected, because you don't know what you don't know. You want to make sure that everybody's okay. You know, the big stress for someone in talent and culture is we know the anxiety was going up. So we have been conducting well-being surveys every 3 months, you know, to have the metrics of, are we following the curve for anxiety level. So, and we found out that our population was the same as the population in Quebec. When anxiety was going up, we were also our anxiety was also going up. And we also try to stay connected with everybody. And this is one thing that maybe characterizes us, and is part of us, whatever.
Oh.
We have some weekly virtual beer time. So this is like, we're going to have our 79th virtual beer time, and we have 450 persons connected on one Zoom. So this is one studio, of course, ADOS Montreal, and our 3 studios do that. We have show and tell for Square Enix Mobile and Montreal, and we have also another show and tell for ADOS Sherbrooke. And this is where we keep in touch, say what's coming, answer questions for employees, and it's really the head of studios that are conducting those meetings. So this is where we gather. It's like your most important meeting of the week.
Oh, brilliant. Jennifer, did you have any? So I realized I moved on from you quite quickly after setting up the conversation. Was there anything from?
Yeah, I'll add a couple of other things that we did as a company based on, you know, staff health. And one of the things we did right off the bat during the pandemic was really increase communication. I think when you're in the office, you take for granted some of those connections, but right off the bat, we just wanted to address anxiety and say, you know what, your health and well-being, safety is our #1 priority, and your jobs are secure. Like that, you know, just laying that out. So that was not one thing they had to deal with. And also instituting more regular all hands meetings, so we could have those connection points and just reiterate those communications all the time, regularly. And we did triple our mental health coverage during that time, just to give more access to counseling, because there was such a, you know, a need for it. We were getting feedback on that. And we also put in place a personal and family care leave So just to take away that anxiety, if you were sick or a family member was sick or something was going on, you would have, you knew what the steps were. And then we also did around the physical health, brought in an occupational therapy to do ergonomic sessions with our team members at home, and did an ergonomics benefit so that you can buy a proper desk and chair for your home office, because people were sitting at their kitchen tables and places that weren't good for their physical self either. So that was one thing that we did as well, which we've gotten a lot of uptake on and a lot of positive feedback, because we do have a very distributed environment. So we don't have office locations for everybody that we are working with. And then we also have a mental health employee resource group that was started by our employees. So just a place they could connect in and with each other. And we do activities too for fun.
That's brilliant. I'm now very self-conscious that I'm sitting on a sofa and not in a very ergonomic environment. But that's fantastic. There is a question in the chat, but it's about the pandemic, and we do come back to the pandemic. So I'll put that on pause, but we are going to answer it. I'm going to go back to sort of Jesse, because we did an interview, not with yourself, I don't think, but earlier in the year. And you talked, and it was a very much around trying to bring in a more diverse group of candidates into the company, and that you'd looked at your hiring practices and reworked some of them to sort of attract a wider breadth of candidates, basically. So I'm interested to know, because actually I wasn't able to ask any thought. What did you do?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. It's interesting. I appreciate that you gave me the heads up a couple of days ago for this question, because like candidly when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I can talk for an hour about this. And then I was like, wait a second. So much of this was a build-up process. It wasn't like we just kind of came with the checklist and we're like, yes, now hiring is fixed. I mean, the first thing that we did was we got very data oriented, not so much setting like targets, but so much as like similar to kind of how we think about development here, like and kind of call it a lowercase a agile fashion, where we wanted to measure, understand, and have a thesis, and just kind of take the scientific approach around it and go, hey, we see, when teams don't look like me, candidly, we see better results. We knew that coming in, so it's like, okay, cool. How do we make less straight white men with beards and receding hair? And we kind of just started from there of going, okay, well, what's preventing that from happening, and really looking in a deconstructionist mindset of what are the steps that are causing us to get in that way. And I want to be careful that I don't take too much credit for this. Jean-Marie Owens, who's our head of operations, was the real architect in this space. And quite literally on a very regular basis, we would come and we would look at like, hey, what's our pipeline producing? Why is it producing that? What feedback are we getting? So we started implementing like a feedback session from the candidates immediately following the kind of the resolution of their candidate experience. And so like whether they got the job or they didn't, we then said, hey, cool, now can you tell us how we did? Like, we're going to tell you how you did, you tell us now. And started asking probing questions. And so things that started to really come up was like, hey, making sure that people found themselves in the candidate experience. So like we have the luxury of having we had the luxury of already having a relatively diverse cast of employees. And so, we were able to kind of field, a larger cast of folks in the interview process, making sure that it's not just like a row of like white dudes kind of like asking questions. We also then kind of really started looking at what other preventative things would happen. So like, for example, with artists, and we tend to hire, as a practice, we only hire folks that have about 7+ years of experience. Like, and when you start to think about the effects that 7 or more years in the industry will, or that life has on folks who have 7 or more years in the industry. And I recognize I'm saying this on a panel with women who should really be the ones saying this, or talking about this rather, but like, turns out your life changes when you hit your mid-30s generally, right? Like things like you have kids, things like you have long-term commitments outside of work, these kind of things. And what that also means is that you probably don't spend your life pruning a portfolio. And so we had to think about that. Similar with engineers, like expecting them to have some deep set of GitHub repos when they're 35 years old, both male and female, candidly, was starting to kind of get unwieldy. And so we started going, oh wait, so we needed to change the process. What is looking at a portfolio or a portfolio of software projects develop for us? Oh, it's confidence in their capabilities. Okay, well, let's move to a paid testing model instead. So like, we have depending on how well we know you coming into the thing, we can then kind of give you an appropriate test to your skill level. And we developed a bunch of tests. And if they take more than a couple hours, then we pay you for it. It's work, right? And so then it sees like, hey, can you do the thing that we want you to do internally? And so it was really about that, is like making sure that people saw who we are, and making sure that we're recognizing who they are and where they're at in their life, and making sure that we're also just kind of speaking to them in that way.
Well, this subject is obviously one of the big challenges and opportunities and whatever word you want to use for the video games industry, and there's a lot of improvement to be made, but I think there's also some improvement has been made. So I'll open up to the rest of the panel. Are there anything that you've sort of introduced to make your places of work more inclusive or more attractive to different types of candidate? Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thinking about it from the very beginning, when you're looking to attract and hire people, we had changed our job postings to make sure they're gender neutral, or to try to be, and ask if you had pronouns that you would like us to use, or a different name. We think about where we post to reach underrepresented groups, and also to actively go to those areas. In our interview process, we practice competency-based interviewing, looking for culture add and not culture fit. So we are getting that diversity and different perspectives coming in. We've done hiring manager training around biases, and how to avoid them and work through that. In our onboarding process, that has been something we've really worked on in the past year, and we hire by cohorts. So there's usually one time in a month where we bring in new hires, so they have each other, which helps with that feeling connected. And then they go through a 2-week period of meeting every group and getting an understanding of what the company does. And in day one, it starts with, a welcome to the company by the executive group and who we are as a company, and introducing that, and sharing some of the bigger things about who we are in regards to that. And then that process of time just brings them in, and gives them exposure. And also we do an email out that introduces every new team member, and we do include pronouns, so everybody does get that knowledge of how does this person want to be addressed. We've looked at our compensation and made sure it's equitable across. We did a full review last year. We have a Women in Games Employee Resource Group where we can share different resources that we've come across. We updated our email signature templates to include pronouns and to include a land acknowledgement, which is pretty important here and in Canada and British Columbia particularly. And we've also added the land acknowledgement on our website. So those are some things that we have done to build that sense that we care, and we want to be looking at building that inclusive environment.
Wow, that's another long list of useful things that people can do for those who are at home. Chelsea, did you have? Saw you on.
Yeah, frankly, my being at things like this is one of the things that I try to do, so that other people can perhaps see someone who looks like them And I had gotten feedback a few years ago from a few of the people who work for us that said, hey, I would have never applied if I hadn't known about you having a position of authority at the company. And so I was someone who was happy to be back of house and happy to be in the shadows and had very gregarious partners, right? But it made me feel very, a big sense of responsibility that I needed to come forward and be seen and allow others to see themselves in me. We've also done a lot of the things that have been mentioned before. We brought on, though, a full-time DEIA program manager because I was trying to do a lot of it, or we were doing it. We were giving employees time inside of their regular schedule, I should say, not outside, in their regular work week to focus, but it wasn't enough. We needed someone who could really spend their 40 hours a week making sure that they were listening, that leadership is being held accountable, that they could propose things based on feedback, that we were combating bias as much as possible. And our approach to hiring is kind of different than Phoenix Labs in that we started doing diversity scholarships at the universities in which in Chicago and Orlando, where we have physical locations. And we kind of realized that if we wanted more diversity in our hiring pipeline, we needed to start the pipeline earlier and really reach out to people who may not know that this is a career that's accessible to them, and to start talking to people and making more connections with universities has really been important to us. And then inclusivity, about 3 years ago, we did a big holistic survey. We do a survey actually every week to see how people are feeling, and that's been great. We get tons of great information there. But people said they felt very included and they wanted more diversity. But we know as we continue to become more diverse, and luckily we have over the last couple of years, that we couldn't lose sight of the inclusivity factor too, and making sure that people all were being respected. We've started to formalize our ERGs a bit more and create more groups, more activities, more ways for them to be heard, more paths to give feedback when we have control of our titles, to give feedback on the titles themselves. We've done some accessibility workshops so we can be more knowledgeable about ways to make our titles more accessible. And then, as I mentioned before, just continuously learn and like Marie-Chantal said, to see what is working and what is not. And we try to replicate what is working and get rid of what is not and keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that you talked about a few things there. The representation thing is so key, and on panels and just public face, even if it's just a picture on the website. Games.biz doesn't do all male panels. We won't take part in them. Ideally we won't have all white panels either. It's a little harder, but we definitely don't do all male panels, and we could fill up all our panels all day long with people that look like me who want to talk, but it's a challenge, but it's important. And the other thing you talked about was the student thing. In the UK, there's a Sumo Digital in the UK have this academy program where they actually go into courses at universities that aren't programming. They might know a bit about it, and they try and get people from entirely different courses, different types of people, different viewpoints, and then they take them through like a boot camp thing, which is paid for, and it's incredible. You can read about that on Games.biz, but there's a lot going on in that space. Marie-Chantal, do you have anything you wanted to?
Yeah, well, it's such a reflection. Of course, I'm gonna be very humble here that we see a lot more that we can do right now. Okay, so it's a really great challenge. The industry of video game in Montreal is about 15,000 persons, but it's not diversified. And this is our pool of talent. So it's really a long-term goal, like Chelsea said, to influence people so that they can take this path when they study very early on in their lives, and encourage notably women to come in the industry. And so we launch committees internally We're doing diagnosis. We have done a confidential survey yet. So we're starting to have the profile of our population, but the goal would be that our population would be the reflect of the local population, but the industry talent pool is not the reflect of that. So this is the challenge. So it's really a long-term challenge that is really important for us. So it's going to be on comeback in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
Well, yeah, and it's yeah. So there's that's one of the Chelsea's talking about, the education element. Actually, you almost need to go much younger and sort of say, hey, games is a career for everybody, and that's a long-term game. There are things we can do in the short term, including attracting people from different industries and stuff, but it is a constant. It's going to be a continued conversation for some time, and hopefully we can keep making progress. This is a massive subject, and we could easily do an entire panel on this. We've done a few best places panels exactly on this, so do check out our YouTube channel. There's a lot more we can talk about. I was going to move on to a different question, but there is a couple of people asking questions about your pandemic strategies in the chat. So I'm going to sort of ask a couple of these while they're here. One is, I'm afraid I can't pronounce your name, but what are your thoughts on work from home productivity levels long term? Are you planning to keep the remote work option once things fully get back to normal? I don't know who wants to. Yeah, go on.
Us, yes, sorry. Yes, us. It's going to be, like I said, people are empowered to choose whether they want to work from their home or the studio, and we said that a year ago to most of the employees. They're gonna get to choose.
Is that everyone, or people undecided? Jesse's shaking his head.
No, we're taking the exact opposite approach. This is super unpopular, and we know that. When we looked at, speaking earlier to the balance, as we measured productivity, there's we've had the opportunity of looking at like many different configurations, from like teams that are fully co-located here in Vancouver, teams that are hybrid here in Vancouver, teams that are fully remote here in Vancouver. Obviously our Montreal SF and LA studios are all fully remote. And it was clear as day for us that overall productivity and health and well-being was improved in an office environment. And so, we've always allowed some amount of hybrid and some amount of fully remote. Like we've had our 7th employee was a fully remote employee. So like we've always been into it, but a whole, when we kind of took a step back, we basically said, hey, if you want to be fully remote, it has to work as well or better, ideally better, obviously. And there have been a number of folks that have transitioned incredibly well to that, and a number of folks that didn't, and we actually asked them to come back in. And it had to be about balance. And for us, it was always about speaking to kind of one of the things that Jennifer talked about earlier was like the safety in your job. And my number one role as a CEO is creating a long-term healthy business that allows for the people who are our ends to be able to kind of thrive. And as we just looked at the mix, when we looked at like the product mix, we weren't finding that balance. And one of the other things that we were also recognizing is, if you look at our industry, very few games are shipping on time right now. And so as we thought about, hey, we've got our business here, we're seeing these things. It's not like it's not like there's like we could read 5 white papers and learn how to do this right from everybody else. It was going to be a lot of like trailblazing on our own, and all of our attempts were not finding outside success as we were when we were internally. And so we made the hard decision of, no, we're going to be an on-site company, and or majoritively on-site. It's in the neighborhood of about 15% of our staff will be permanent remote, is kind of the idealized state. And then we've always allowed hybrid. Like if you don't want to come into work tomorrow and you just want to put your headphones on and do your thing at home, as long as it's not impacting anybody else on your team, go nuts. But flexibility and personalization, as long as it meets our business goals, it has been our number one thing. Because the other side of it too is if we're making a commitment to do things like not do crunch and not rely on crunch and not allow, and punish crunch creating behaviors, you know, there's the number one largest crunch creating behavior that we've seen is remoteness and disconnection between teams. Like the more teams collaborate and the better the communication and the better that the planning happens in a collaborative way, the more likely people are to be able to achieve maximal results. Again, this is just our company, you know, and I don't want to say that like these other like that, like I actually really respect what IDOS is doing, because like they looked internally, saw that, hey, they had this half day a week, and realistically, like, you know, that wasn't jiving enough, and like, hey, 4 days a week, and you know, was actually creating the realistic thing. And also one of the things that I would actually love to hear more from Marie-Chantal personally is like, hey, there was I had read that there was a reflection around meeting culture, and it, you know, going down to 4 days a week really caused an interesting reflection of meeting culture. And I think that that's also a really interesting and vibrant way of, or a really interesting learning rather. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Lots of things to talk about.
Sorry, very interesting topic.
Well, maybe we'll come back to the reflection of meeting culture, because that's really good. Well, first, Chelsea and Jennifer, if there's did you what are you planning on doing? Do you know yet?
We plan to do a hybrid, so somewhere in between. We've always offered some flexibility. We do have a little fully remote pod down in Austin, Texas too. And, you know, like our 7th employee was also fully remote, so they're going to remain that way. But we do think that we do our best work, and that leads to the stability of the company, like Jesse was saying, when we are together. So we do really want to encourage people to come back. And in March, we're going to start to phase people back into the offices, barring any other data that tells us that's not wise. And we've read a lot of studies and looked at a lot of data that shows that in creative industries, coming together in person is very important. So we want to give people flexibility. Go to your doctor's appointment, take the day off and go to your kids' thing, take some mental health days, all of that. Or, there may be times when you can just get in the flow and work from home, and that's great. But we do want to see people. I felt that what Jesse said was incredibly moving about the person who broke down. And I think we are seeing that. We're seeing people who think they want to be home all day in their underpants eating Cheetos. And really then when they get around people, and I'm an introvert by nature, you realize how much you've missed that. And these little casual connections you make with people and the casual conversations you have that really spark bigger ideas and energy. And you can go out for a drink with a coworker after work and get to know them. You're not going to as much get on another Zoom call with your coworker to get to know them better from home. So we really want to bolster all of those. We have people in different locations, so of course we need to connect them. They're not always going to be together. But we also realized to that end that prior to the pandemic, people were so eager to travel between locations and meet each other. So there had to be something to that, and people are talking about that again. When can I travel again? Or when can I have a small group? We're starting to allow small groups to meet outside. Not pressuring people, but saying, if you want to meet together with your team, small groups of 10 or less, we are supporting that. So we do really see a desire for connection. We do think it's when we do our best work is in person together to some extent.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would just say where we're going is the choice. You can work in the office if we have an office, and that's our key thing. We don't have offices where a lot of our team members are, so there's not a choice at this time. And when we did hire many of them, they knew that, and we have built a distributed workforce. So our thoughts at this point are we're going to be more culture hubs that we're building in key locations, not like necessarily that office space where you go in, you sit at your desk every day and work, or your workstation, but it's a place where you can go and connect, where we have a number of people working in a proximity that works. And I think we're going to adapt. I think we'll see how it goes, right? As people get out more, maybe that connection is going to be the draw that we do need to be looking at spaces in more places. So choice, but we're also realizing that what is going to come is going to change, and we need to adapt with that and do what we need to do to support team members.
It's one of the things that that's come up in a conversation I've had recently with another developer, was that the hybrid model, because I'm a Games Industry.Biz has always been a remote team basically, but the rest of the company we work for, a lot of them work in the office. So the Eurogamer team work in the office, the PAX team work in an office, and actually we've always felt a little bit not in the group, like a little bit outside of the group as a result of that. And it's purely, but nothing because we're treated any differently. It's because we're not there. We're not you're not having the 4 p.m. Sort of sit down and hang out. We're not part of that. And sort of when you're fully remote, you can prepare for that. When you're fully in the office, you can do that. When you're sort of hybrid, there will be ways, and we'll all find those ways. But sort of trying to maintain that culture is something that's I think will be interesting to look at as hopefully we get to a position where that is a problem to have. Well, actually, Jesse, you asked an interesting question of Marie Chantal there about meeting culture and any discovery. Sorry to put you on the spot, Marie Chantal.
Yeah, it's fine. Can I go back to one point? About the full flexibility. We did ask our employees, if you were in an ideal world, how many days would you come to work? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And it's a perfect normal curve. 10% said 5 days a week, 10% said 0 days a week, and all the rest said 2 to 3 days, but I want to be the one to choose. So we started also an initiative on how we're going to organize that hybrid work when we come back. So it's a design thinking that's coming in the organization and the goal is to have a worldwide talent pool. So it's hard to force someone to come to work when they're in London and we're in Montreal. So that hybrid work is really inevitable. And in the same initiative, we're also in the Workday Week, we're optimizing, of course, the meetings, like Jesse said. When you do it yourself, you organize your own meeting, you're good at it. When you do it your own team, well, you make the work of your own team more efficient because you coordinate all together. But now we want to do it with the studio-wise. Do we force to have some downtime where everybody focus on what they have to do, less meetings? So we're still in the reflection of all that, but we want to make sure we have the guidelines for everybody. So that we are more efficient in that. So it comes in the form.
Well, in the UK, we're although whether or not we should be or not is a debate, but we're fully sort of opened up. And the first thing I did was take an axe to meetings because I had to. Otherwise, I was never going to leave the house because I couldn't do it because I had too many Zoom calls to attend every single day. But that's I enjoyed doing that. And we do have one more other question about the pandemic. We might have more. I can only see one more, but is about the fact that I guess you've all growing studios. You've all expanded quite a lot during the pandemic. You've hired loads of people during this situation. How have they felt about this? How have they managed? How's that integration gone? And yeah, I guess that's quite a complicated question. Has that made? Do they feel differently to the people that used to be in the office? Nobody jumping in.
I just don't want to take up too much airtime. I can speak to us. It's been a mixed bag. When we look at the data, folks who the factors that we have seen that are like, call it indicators, retention indicators, are now more like the factor strength of them, like the p-value of those is a bunch higher. And so, if folks are, for example, one of our factors that we saw in retention is like if folks tend to leave jobs once a year, they tend to leave jobs once a year even more now. If you look at their resume kind of thing, right? And so as we think about, we've had to, ensure that we're understanding that, like, if management quality, for example, had to get better for us and those kind of things. So like there's been quite an impact on the newer folks more than on the older folks. Like the folks who are coming in, their factors were multiplied rather than, interestingly enough, the folks who had been around for the 5 years prior. So we're coming up on 8 years now. We're kind of a younger subset of this group, and the first 5-year folks versus the most recent 2-year folks, those factors are elevated. No new factors, interestingly enough, but just that there's an elevation there.
Yeah, we've lost. We generally have incredibly robust retention. When one person leaves, people freak out. Honestly, that's been how it's gone for our entire history. However, we had a handful of people leave who'd been with us less than a year. And so going back to why do we want to bring people in person again? We've known when we've had people who've been remote, except for the people who've been with us a long time, it's easier for them to leave. They're not making those connections. The tasks and what we can give them just flat out as a job or benefits is only one part of what makes people want to stay. They want to feel, I know we said connection a million times, but they want to have friends. We actually lost someone who he'd left us before and come back. And he said, one of the big things was I didn't reconnect with any of my friends when I came back. I've been working on my projects. I've enjoyed the work. You've given me space to grow because, of course, I'm asking all these questions, but I didn't reconnect with any of my friends. And so we have to realize it's not just about us and what kind of policies we could create. We need to make space for people to have time with one another that's outside of work, that makes them feel connected to others in the office or in a park or whatever. So people have said that they feel the culture, and we've done a lot to bolster that, to think about in-person culture. You're really managing 3 cultures: hybrid culture, remote culture, in-person culture. And that's a lot of work and energy to make everyone feel seen in 3 different cultures and different geographical regions where people have different cultures too, and different expectations of how far do I walk to the office. So there's so many things to think about, but a lot of them don't necessarily have to do with any policy leadership makes. It has to do with people finding friends.
Wow. We could talk about that subject, right? Okay, Jennifer, go on.
Well, I was just thinking, because I have a bit of a different perspective in our experience. And I think it's because our size and our growth has been so fast, and we've changed so much as an organization, that our new people almost have a better sense of who we are now as Hyper Hippo than who we were as a pretty indie small developer, because we put so much into our onboarding practice of introducing them to the company. So we just had a conversation yesterday about, actually, I think we need to have all our team members go through our onboarding process just to refresh, go back to who we are, and just get this insight into each of the groups that we have, and really the really smart people and the incredible work they're doing to kind of pull that together. So it has been an interesting perspective that way, that I feel like our new hires are actually our most engaged and really excited about what we're doing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
We're going to want your secrets.
Okay, I'll have to, get some money for that or something.
Well, I'll go back. We'll leave the pandemic for a moment there. I don't know if we'll go back to it. It's quite, again, we could do an entire could do this entire conference, I suspect, on this subject. And the answers would change from year to year and from company to company and from territory to territory. I'm actually going to ask a specific question of you, Chelsea, because we had a little interview earlier in the year. And one of the things that you talked about in that is you talked about sort of trying to make sure that your company's crunch free, right? Is one of the things that you've worked hard on. So how have you achieved that? How have you managed to destroy that?
Say we have 99% achievement. Of course, there some very isolated times when people work more, but we're really adamant both about rescoping. Whenever we have the opportunity or the control to do that, we rescope. We really talk to people about raising flags as one of our values, that if you're having an issue, you need to raise a flag so we can help you strategize and help figure out how to solve that problem, help figure out how to rescope or move a date or change things. And then we do a lot of business to business work. We help a lot of other companies. And so we're really straightforward with them about how we treat our employees and our best 40. And if things get out of hand or we have a partner who starts demanding extra work, we don't just make the team deal with that. Actually, Dave Lang, usually our founder, he's the one who has that phone call and talks to our partner about our values, and that we ask people to do their best 40. And I've kind of even gotten over the idea of best 40, to give the best work they can to just get their tasks done, right? What are your commitments, and get them done. So I think it's really those strategies of scoping, making sure people feel empowered to say no, or say I made a mistake, or I have a problem and we need to find out how we can have a solution to this. And then also not being afraid to stand up for our values and what we believe in.
Just to underscore what you're saying, Chelsea, so as a very proud client of Iron Galaxy for many years, I phoned Dave 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, and said, hey, I need a bunch of help. And he's like, cool, we're busy. No. And like that level up, when you're in a business company, turning down clients is a big deal. And, the amount of like pride that actually swelled in my heart when I heard him say like, look, it's just not going to happen. We're too busy. I can't ask my guys for more. And I'm just like, cool, I'll call you. Like, call me when you got some time, because I really want to work with you some more. And so like, I really want to underscore what Chelsea's saying, like that they do walk the walk.
No, good.
Thank you.
It's true then. No lies. Ask the whole panel, any other tips on sort of avoiding excessive overtime?
Sorry, could I just make one comment? When you said no lies, for me, that is one of the things that is so important to me every day, that the things I say in panels like this, that the things I write when I write a blog or do an interview, I conscientiously check to make sure they are still real. And that people are experiencing them in the company, and that I'm not just saying things because they sound nice. It is so important to me that they are real. So I just had to say that.
I was joking. I never thought you were lying.
No, I didn't. No, I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying that, it's something that I take it very, very seriously, and it's something I care very much about.
Yeah, because people will find out, but it's things change as well. So I'll go back to the question I was about to ask. So everybody, does anyone else have any tips or things that you do to try and limit that excessive overtime if it's an issue you've ever encountered?
Yeah, we just launched Guardians of the Galaxy. You probably all know that. So and it's been finalized through a pandemic, working from home, so quite a challenge. And the key word here is excessive overtime. And the thing, we don't want to accept that. All our leaders have families, and they show the example. They take some time off. They take some vacation. And the planning was extremely well organized to finalize that game. I'm not going to say that there was no overtime, because there was. Of course, it's the end of a great project. but it's not in the culture. We don't want that to stay in the culture. And before you begin a game, having to work overtime, we want to minimize this to the. Actually, we want to erase that. We want to make sure that we plan and organize so that we advance at a regular rate to be able to finalize at the end.
Yeah, a deadline industry. Say you can completely eradicate overtime is going to be. It's going to be a challenge, but I sort of it's those stories of people working 3 months, weekends and evenings and or even a month, right? It's that stuff that we're sort of we're talking about here. Jessie, Jennifer, do you have any things that you do to try and limit that or get rid of it?
I don't have anything really practical or a difference, right? And building your production plan so it is realistic, making sure you're accounting for all those things that come up and reevaluating it. One of the things that we've been talking about quite a bit though as an organization is how do we empower our team members to make decisions in their role so they're not having to go up and ask. So building a framework for basically an operating system is what we're calling it. So, in this role I know how I can move forward. So you're making your own decisions within the scope that you have, and you can remove your own roadblocks in some ways. So more of a philosophical approach to how can we be more efficient, move faster based on knowing levels of, authority and just empowering people to make decisions.
Very similarly, we spend a lot of time on contextualization and how to best enable folks to make the right decisions on behalf of the company rather than within the scope of their work, right? So if an engineer says, hey, I'm going to go and build a login system, do they making sure that they understand all of the bells and whistles in it so that when they come back and they give us an estimate that that it's as accurate as it can possibly be, and revisiting frequently and having a lot of, honest, hard conversations around, there's an analogy we use internally of hey, if you signed up to paint this room in a week and we walk in on Tuesday and one of the walls isn't painted, we probably have a problem and we should talk about it on Tuesday, not on Thursday. And God forbid we talk about it on Friday. And so, the more that we have kind of, ingrained that kind of mindset, the more successful we've been. And it comes and goes. As we've kind of gotten better at production, we've tightened up a lot of practices. And then, we candidly, in the post-launch phases of Dauntless plus pandemic, it got worse, not better. But I do think that to what Jennifer was talking about, really helping people make the best decisions for themselves, and enabling them to not be waiting around for the boss to tell them what to do, actually is one of the best ways to reduce crunch. If telling somebody, hey, no, you tell me how long it's going to take, I'll figure out how to slot the plan, but you tell me what it's actually going to take, and then having that be what we call a high integrity commitment, where it's hey, do you act have you gone and done all the research? Have you talked to QA? Have you worked with the publishing team to figure out what the right date is? Do you understand what the date means? And so as an example, as historically the kind of the product guy, I no longer set the dates for teams. The teams are expected to set the dates for themselves, and be able to kind of understand what the market impact of those dates are being. Oh, hey, cool. So you missed E3. That's a thing. Do we care about that? And having those kind of conversations rather than saying, cool, no, you have to make your E3 demo or you're fired. That's not, we just don't want to operate like that anymore. And actually we've gotten wildly better results. Turns out when a group of really smart, highly empowered individuals who are really good at their jobs make decisions all day long, it turns out they make really good ones on average. So.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Well, that's pretty, we've gone through so many big topics. We've talked about crunch, we've talked about diversity, inclusivity, we've talked about mental health, we talked about the pandemic, we've talked about 4-day weeks. But this is it's a bit of an unusual to sort of drop a general question this far into the panel, but what do you think individually, what do you think are the biggest challenges for games employers today? Is it one of those, or is it something else? Marie, Michelle, do you want to start off? You're on mute. You're on mute, Marie.
Thank you. Sorry. Apparently, it's the sentence of the year. So it's hard to say what is the biggest. I mean, we have lots of challenges. So I could go on and on. We have an HR plan that goes for the next 3 years. So for us, it's really about doing it together, empowering people, focus on making sure that they come to work at their best, being rested, more creative, more efficient, and allow them to focus on their talent. This is what we want them to be. Okay, so so that's what I would say right now on the top of my head.
Chelsea, do you want to go next? What's your biggest challenge you face?
Sure. I think all employers really, to be successful, it's kind of like, I don't know, in the 80s, people were saying that the teachers were becoming the new parents, or the new, just had this broader swath of responsibility over people. And I feel like as an employer, we're having more of a broad swath of responsibility over people. And so understanding how to make that a positive experience for everyone, understanding, I know we talked about mental health, but understanding, do we need a mental health person on staff? Is that something new? Understanding where are these evolving places where people need to feel supported? Because I do think, especially with the pandemic, work, even if it's been remote, work has become people's everything, and maybe that's too reductive, but we've become a much bigger presence in their life, and people are looking to work to offer them a lot of different types of opportunities, not just tasks. So I think it's paying attention to where do you need to evolve, and not being afraid to make mistakes. That's kind of challenging, just to make sure that we're always paying attention.
Very good. Jennifer, do you have any? What do you think the biggest challenges are?
Well, I do think attracting and retaining talent is a challenge, especially diverse talent. You know, we're all looking to diversify our teams, so there is definitely a focus on that area particularly. And we've experienced it here at least twice, where we've had very talented, skilled women who have been headhunted and made an offer that, they're like, we love it here, but this is too good to pass up. And it's like, oh, that's an impact to our business, because we're trying to grow our diverse talent as well. So I think that's a challenge. And with mobility and distributed workplaces, there's a mix. Like, you can go anywhere, you can get different talent. It's opened up opportunities for us. It's been a good thing, but it also puts that variability into it as well. Now not hiring in a location base, you're not stuck here in, one area. You can work anywhere. So I still think that's a big challenge, is attracting and retaining a diverse talent.
Jesse, do you have well, that is the biggest challenge, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of games companies, one of the reasons a lot of people take part in these awards is to try and be that differentiator, isn't it? And
I think that's going to obviously be a major bias of this group. If you think about the why the selection criteria for these awards are companies that care about their people. And so, obviously my answer is very similar, making sure that we're bringing in the best talent, the right talent, who are very, who add to our mosaic culture, and, make sure that they're happy, healthy, and fulfilled for as long as makes sense in their lives. the other thing that I would add that I don't think we've talked very much about is I think we're at a really interesting impasse in our industry where our industry, compared to a lot of technology, is very old school in their management style, very hierarchical often. Very lots of command and control. There's still a lot of kind of great manism internationally, not less so on the West Coast, but as you kind of get into like European studios and Southeast Asian studios and South American studios, there's kind of this like very hierarchical thinking, and I think that is falling quickly out of fashion in 2000s plus management style. And if you kind of I actually think we're really lagging behind in how to think about organizing people and work as an industry. And I think there's a huge opportunity for a larger narrative around how do we better organize ourselves, and how do we better give things like feedback. We talk a lot about a lot of the narratives that our industry are full of right now are outcomes of really candidly poor management systems, right? Like, how is harassment a thing we should be talking about in 2020, like 2021 rather? Like, we shouldn't be having this conversation anymore. We're a high-end tech. We are the, you could argue we're the most complicated high-end industry on earth, right? Like, I used to make a joke that Amazon was able to put a rocket into space before they shipped their first video game. We used to always make jokes about it's not rocket science. Well, yeah, no, it's actually harder. And yet we have all of these problems that really come from, just not just behavioral management, but also like organization, and how do we find find the right people and get them in the door, but also how do we like not talk about folks as like Pokemon, and how do we make sure that we're building these really vibrant communities, like, because as society is learning more about organization, 1900s style management systems are just not going to produce the types of the next generation of great workplaces. And I think if I can bring anything to the world and share stuff and hopefully deconstruct some of these kind of mentalities, I'm going to be a much happier camper.
That's quite a good answer. That's a great answer. It's ever changing thing. I'm just going to quickly go to the questions. It's on a different screen, so I keep seeing me glance because I'm looking to see if it. We've got a very specific question here from Nicholas. What pulse survey tool do you use? Is it good? I don't know. I take it you must use something. Chelsea, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, we use 15.5, and I know some other companies have adopted it. We basically had a performance management team. I was one of the members on that, and along with Tom Carbone, we did a bunch of research, and we found some things that didn't work so well first, but it works well for us because it's both a feedback tool and a pulse generator, and we get both qualitative and quantitative data of how people are feeling, what are their challenges, what are the things that they feel good about every single week. And so we consolidate that data to look for trends or to look for one-off issues or people might be having, and then their managers or their PLs is the language we use, can talk to them about that.
I don't know who can go next. Marie Chantal? Also,
while you were asking the question, the internet cut, so I didn't hear the question. So I just want to say not anything yet.
It is. What pulse survey tool do you use, and does it work for you?
Pulse survey. We use it. It's a home survey. So we ask questions, different questions that are based on the context that we are living. Mm-hmm. But we are fortunate enough to have Workday. So sometimes we use Workday when the data are not too confidential. And so this is what we have used those every 3 months for well-being surveys. And after that, we consolidate all the information and we give it back to leadership. because and they have the results for every studios or every unit, and they can act on it. And the action plan are taken with the HRBPs that really help and support leadership to make sure that that we grow on that.
We use Workday at our company. It has its pros and cons.
It's not super sexy in our organization. People complain about the UX, but it's still working.
Yeah, so. I just want it to tell me how many days holiday I've got, which involves about 10 different links and a bit of maths. I will. Jesse, do you use a?
Yeah, we're not quite as frequent as Chelsea with the but we do a by year or twice yearly survey. We just use Google Forms that and it's a mix of quant and qualitative feedback. Like we use a Likert scale system for, there's about 40 some odd questions in it that go on a 1 to 5 scaling. We modify the Likert to a 3 is considered a failure for us, and then so it's like a block of questions, and then written, and then that nicely kind of folds up into Google Forms or Google Sheets rather, and then I'm a bit of a data nerd, if you haven't kind of guessed by some of my answers so far, so that I then take that I'm one of the 3 people who kind of consolidate that. So we keep it actually at the highest levels of the company, because we want it to make sure that it's a good trapdoor to if your boss is not feedbacking up, direct line input into my eye holes is your feedback. And then the cool thing is, and we also keep that, it's not anonymous, but we anonymize the data when we share it back to the team. So you can get that highly contextual version to the leadership team that then, we can kind of parcel out appropriately in an anonymous way, but make sure that we understand the problem set. And then when we give it back to the team, you can use Google's Data Studio, data visualization software. It's kind of like Tableau or whatever. And you can feed Google Sheets into that. So then I can kind of go to the team and be like, hey, go cut the data up yourself. Here's the anonymized data. If you want to, here by studio, by team, by blah, right? You can go and have that yourself if you don't believe what we're saying. And so it's a really nice system of highly transparent, relatively anonymous, but also the value of non-anonymous data, because I think you need both in order to feel comfortable. You need transparency, but you also to get transparency, you need anonymity, and to get value, you need context. And those two things are very much in polar alignment. And so we've, over the years, we've been doing this since day one, and over the years we've really shifted how we do it to make sure that we can try and meet both of those value needs.
Yeah, I can see that. Jen, if you don't have to answer this, we've had some 3 great answers, but is there any system that you use that's
I'll just share this system because it might be of interest. But we don't do pulse surveys either, but we do biannual engagement surveys, and we use Culture Amp, and we've really liked it. It has multiple layers, and yes, same, it anonymizes, and we can layer who sees what. So it's been really good. And then we do ongoing different surveys as needed, especially around back to work and whatnot. So that's what we use.
That's great stuff. Hopefully that answers your question, Nicholas. Also from one of the Best Places to Work awards winners, actually, from Behaviour Interactive, who are also one of the top studios in Canada. I think I've gone through all the questions. There's another one that I'm not quite sure. I think it's a pandemic one, but I'm not entirely sure I know what that question is. So I'm going to, but I think I've gone through all the questions there. So I'm going to end on one big question. This has been a long old panel, and you could have watched Disney Pixar's Up in this time, but I'm glad that you stayed with us, because it's a lot of useful, interesting tips. But let's end on one final tip then. I'd like every one of our panelists to share with us one tip that has helped make the lives of your employees better that everyone else can go and steal. I'm going to pick. Shall I pick on someone to go first? Jennifer, do you want to go first?
Sure. I don't have anything new. I feel like I've already talked about it. Sorry, but it really is about listening and finding out how team members are doing and then taking action based on how they are doing and just giving them lines of communication to share. That's really been the biggest help to our employees. And I did ask this question around because I wanted to, get some data. It's like, what has been the biggest thing? And that is the feedback I got, is that we listen, we ask, and we take action on what is heard. So that would be my my big tip, is just be asking how people are doing and what needs to what can we do to help, and making change.
Listener to that. Chelsea?
Yeah, I think it's radical caring, and we really have to have compassion for people. We have to look at the individual, but we can't just look at one individual and only have empathy for one story. We have to create an environment of compassion for all of our employees. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable. And when Jesse was talking about making a flatter structure, it's something we're trying to hold on to, because I think it scares some people who aren't used to it and what are the benefits, but also just helping people to understand why we've done things the way we are, making sure people understand our culture and that why we're making decisions in the way we have, what we think is successful, and how do we balance the authenticity and the inclusivity and the lack of bias, because the authenticity and then making everything equitable kind of come at odds sometimes. And so you have to be uncomfortable a lot in following these paths and making decisions. I know that was roundabout, but hopefully it answered it.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Good piece of advice. Jesse, do you want to go next?
Sure. I think, the biggest tip that I had, it's interesting because as both Jennifer and Chelsea were talking, I changed my answer through, and it was like, when Jennifer was talking, my answer was going to be like, whole cloth, go adopt Brene Brown's Dare to Lead methodologies. Like, just go read that book, get everybody in your company to read that book, and you'll be better off. And then she's like, hey, listen to people. I'm like, oh shit, okay, cool. And then it was like, hey, understand, kind of who you want to be. And I was like, oh yeah, go read, Culture Code and go read some stuff on culture. But I think that the gist is basically like, you kind of got to understand who you want to be, and you're going to have to do a lot of work, and you're going to have to do a lot of research. The reality of the world that we're living in today, and the training systems that come into our industry today by default, are wholly unsatisfactory to creating great workplaces, and you're going to have to dedicate a lot of personal time and energy to creating a great work environment. There's no one size fits all thing, as we're experiencing here. Like, Jennifer and I are like a 2-hour drive from each other, and we have very, she has highlighted some amazingly interesting things that they do differently. And I'm taking notes. I have like a whole page of notes of like, okay, I got to ping her about this and this and this. And like, that's the reality is here, like there's not a nice, like, Chris, to your point earlier, like we could hold whole panels on many things because we're actually so woefully behind in our baseline. So like, saddle up for research and do a lot of it. Read a lot of books.
I like that. Good. Get reading. Read Games Industry Biz as well. It's useful website full of handy tips. To wrap us up then, Marie Chantal, do you have a tip for the viewers?
You said one word, huh? But but I'm gonna say everything that's been said. I totally agree, but also be indulgent. Nobody has been their best self in the last months. And it has waves, sometimes you're good, sometimes you're down. And probably because I'm in HR, a lot of people talk to me and say, I think I did a mini burnout. Don't say it to anyone. And then I heard that a lot, not only for employees or from colleagues, but from friends, from family members. I mean, it's our first pandemic, just joking about it. But so just be indulgent and understand that people are sometimes not the best of themselves. Our society is changing. The organization is changing. The industry is changing. So we're all changing. We're all going to adapt, be different. So Yeah, that would be my advice. Be indulgent, evolve, adapt.
One of the words I liked for a lot of entries in the best place to work was Canada used this was kindness.
Yes.
About being a kinder organization and just being a bit more understanding of each other. And I think that, you know, I think that sort of speaks to what you were just saying there, and I wholeheartedly agree. Well, look at that. I ended on the dot. That's amazing. Thank you. That's all we have time for today. Thank you to all of our panelists. You've been brilliant. It's been a long one, this, but I think it's been really, really useful and fascinating. As I say, we could probably do a conference just on these subjects. Do check out games.biz and our YouTube channel. We have loads of videos on this sort of stuff. And this is up there with some of the best. But all I have left to say now is thank you for watching. Thank you to MEGAMIGS for letting us for doing this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Yeah, I'll see you later.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.